The moon sat high over the forbidden forest near Skeldrame, cold and bright like an unblinking eye. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches twisting together like dark fingers. Even the wind sounded careful here, as if it did not want to wake whatever spirits guarded this place. At midnight, 3 men moved through the forest with torches covered in cloth to hide the light. They walked fast but not like men who were lost. They walked like men who had done something terrible and wanted it finished quickly. Between them they dragged a body. The man was tall, broad, and heavy with muscle, but his strength was trapped inside him like a beast locked behind iron bars. His arms hung uselessly. His legs scraped the ground. His head rolled to the side as if he had no bones in his neck. He was alive. His chest still rose and fell, but his eyes were half open and empty, unable to focus. He could not speak. He could not fight. He could only feel. A paralytic poison ran through his blood, holding his body hostage while his mind stayed awake to watch what was happening to him. They brought him to a clearing where the earth was already disturbed. A shallow grave waited, freshly dug. The soil smelled new, damp and raw like an open wound. One of the men stood over the grave and adjusted the hood on his face. He looked down at the paralyzed man and gave a short laugh that held no humor. "Still breathing," he muttered. Another man spat into the dirt. "He won't be for long." They dropped the body into the hole like it was trash. The man hit the bottom with a dull thud. His head turned. His cheek pressed into cold soil. He tried to move. He tried to open his mouth and scream. His chest tightened with panic. Nothing happened. Above him the men stared down. "He's the crown prince," the third man said, sounding nervous now that the reality sat in front of them. "If anyone finds out." "No one will," the first man snapped. "We were told what to do. We do it and we disappear." They began to shovel dirt into the grave. The first scoop landed on the man's shoulder. The second hit his face. The third covered his mouth. His heart hammered wildly in his chest. His lungs burned even though he had not run. His brain screamed at his body to move, to roll, to rise, to claw his way out. He could not even blink properly. The dirt kept coming. And while he lay there, fully awake, fully aware, the prince understood the truth in a way that words could never explain. This was not an accident. This was not a hunting mistake. This was planned. Someone wanted him gone. Someone wanted the throne. He tried to hold his breath. He tried to stay calm. But the soil packed tighter with every shovel. It pressed into his nose, into his lips, into his ears. It filled the small spaces where air could have stayed. One thought rose above everything else, sharp and painful. My brother. Prince Kaelric had ordered this. By morning the kingdom would still believe their lie, that Prince Ragnar died in a tragic hunting accident, and Prince Kaelric would stand closer to the crown. When the grave was filled, the men stamped down the soil with their boots. They covered the area with scattered leaves and broken branches, hiding the fresh mound like hunters hiding a trap. Then they vanished into the trees. Silence returned. Only the forest remained. And beneath the earth, Prince Ragnar lay in darkness, his heart still beating, his lungs taking smaller and smaller breaths. Not dead yet, but dying. Not far away, deeper in the forest where no palace guard cared to patrol, Liara moved between the trees with quiet steps. Liara was a rejected Omega. Even the words tasted bitter. Rejected meant she had no pack. No protection. No home. No right to speak in council. No right to stand beside others at the fire. It meant she survived by staying invisible. 3 moons ago, she had been thrown beyond the boundary stones like something unwanted. Wolves she had known since childhood watched and did nothing. Not one voice rose for her. Not one hand reached out. Since then, her life had become simple in the hardest way. Find food. Find water. Avoid patrols. Avoid wolves. Avoid being seen. Tonight, her stomach hurt with hunger. The cold had already bitten into her bones. Autumn was deepening and winter was coming fast. So she took a risk and came near the forbidden part of the forest, closer to the lands that belonged to the palace. She was searching for mushrooms and roots, the kind that could keep her alive for another day. Then she stopped. Her nose lifted slightly. Her wolf stirred inside her. A smell cut through the damp air. Blood. Fresh blood. Metallic, sharp, and wrong. Liara's body tensed. Blood meant violence. Violence meant danger. And danger was never meant for a rejected Omega to investigate. Rejected Omegas who stepped into pack matters often disappeared. Liara should have turned around. She should have run. But beneath the blood scent was something else. An alpha scent. strong, rich, and fading like a fire losing oxygen. It was wrong for an alpha scent to be fading like this. Alphas did not die easily. Not unless someone had made sure they would. Liara's feet moved before her mind fully agreed. She walked carefully, silent as shadow, following the scent trail through thick trees and over roots slick with dew. The smell grew stronger, leading her toward a clearing. When she reached the edge, she froze. Moonlight spilled across churned earth. The ground had been disturbed recently. Soil was piled in careless mounds. Leaves had been thrown over it like a weak attempt to hide it. Someone had dug here. Liara's throat tightened. Then she saw it. A hand. Pale fingers pushed out of the dirt, shaking with the smallest movement. Not waving. Not reaching high. Just twitching as if the body beneath could barely command even that. Liara's heart slammed so hard she felt it in her ears. Someone was buried here. Someone was alive. Liara dropped to her knees. Her hands went into the soil immediately. She dug like she had no fear left. The dirt was colder than she expected, heavier, packed down hard. Her nails scraped against stones. Soil forced itself under her fingers. Her hands began to sting. She did not stop. She tore into the earth with raw desperation. She shoved dirt away until it flew behind her. Her breath came fast and harsh, fogging the air. Pain burst through her fingers as her nails cracked. Blood ran. Still she dug. Because under the fear was something stronger. Not bravery. Not heroism. Just a simple refusal. Not like this. Not alone. Not buried alive. Her hands struck fabric. She dug faster, uncovering a shoulder, then a chest, then a face. A man's face. Young, maybe in his early 20s. Strong jaw. Dark hair matted with soil and sweat. His skin looked pale under the moonlight, his lips dry and slightly blue from lack of air. His eyes were closed. Liara pressed her fingers against his neck, searching. A pulse. Faint, stuttering. But there. She sucked in a breath. He was still alive. Liara scraped dirt from his nose and mouth, clearing his airway. She tilted his head back slightly the way she had once seen healers do in her old pack. His chest rose weakly. A small breath. Then another. But it was not enough. He would suffocate if she didn't pull him free. Liara hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled. His body was heavy, alpha heavy, solid muscle and strength even while helpless. Her small frame shook with effort. Her boots slipped in loose soil. Her arms burned. She pulled anyway. Inch by inch, she dragged him out of the grave and onto the cold grass. When his body finally cleared the hole, Liara collapsed beside him, gasping. Her fingers throbbed. Her palms were scraped raw. She forced herself to look at him properly. The moonlight caught his clothing. Not simple cloth. Not common leather. Silver threading lined the torn fabric at his collar. A crest was stitched into his shirt, a royal mark, clean and unmistakable. Liara's blood turned to ice. She knew that crest. Everyone in Skeldrame knew it. Her eyes lifted to the man's face again. And the truth hit her like a slap. Prince Ragnar. The firstborn son of King Alaric. The future king. The prince the kingdom believed was dead. Liara's mind screamed at her to run. If anyone found her here with him, they would blame her. A rejected Omega beside the missing prince? She would be executed before she could speak a single word. She pushed herself up, ready to flee. Then a hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Liara froze. The grip was weak, shaking but desperate. Prince Ragnar's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused, glazed with pain and lack of air, but they found her face and held. His lips moved slowly. His voice came out as a rough whisper. "Don't leave me." Liara stared at him, her throat tight. Before she could answer, she heard something that made her entire body go cold. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Crashing through the forest. Torches flickered between the trees, moving closer. They were coming back. The men who buried him were returning to make sure he was dead. Liara didn't think anymore. She acted. She grabbed Ragnar under the arms and dragged him toward the edge of the clearing. His legs scraped the ground. He tried to help, but he was too weak. Too poisoned. Too close to death. Still she dragged him. They tumbled into a thick patch of bushes and brambles. Liara shoved branches aside, pulling him deeper until leaves covered them like a shield. Then torchlight spilled into the clearing. 3 men entered, swords at their hips. Hoods pulled low. One carried a shovel. They saw the empty grave. They stopped. For a moment there was only silence. Then the biggest one cursed. "He's gone." Another voice hissed, shocked. "That's impossible. No one comes here." The biggest man kicked at the disturbed soil. Someone dug him out. Liara's breath stopped in her chest. She pressed her body tighter against Ragnar, covering his mouth with her hand so he wouldn't make a sound. Ragnar's eyes were open wide now, filled with terror and fury. The third man spoke, voice lower. Prince Kaelrik said no mistakes. The name hit Liara like thunder. Prince Kaelrik. The younger brother. The one who wanted the throne. So it was true. Ragnar's own blood had ordered his death. The biggest man growled, spread out. Find him. If he reaches the palace, everything falls apart. The men split up, torches swinging, shadows dancing across the trees as they searched. Liara held her breath until her lungs burned. She did not move. She did not blink. She listened. A torch passed near their hiding spot, close enough that Liara saw the glow through the leaves. Close enough that she could smell sweat and leather and steel. Then it moved away. The footsteps faded. The voices grew distant. Finally the clearing fell quiet again. Liara waited longer, long enough to be sure. Then she slowly removed her hand from Ragnar's mouth. His eyes met hers in the darkness. He looked like a man who had just watched his whole world collapse. Liara swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. You're not safe here. Ragnar's lips parted, and his voice came out rough and broken. My brother. Liara nodded once, terrified and certain at the same time. And in that moment, as the cold wind moved through the forbidden forest, Liara understood the weight of what she had done. She had not just saved a stranger. She had pulled the future king of Skeldrime out of his grave. And now both of them were hunted. Liara tightened her grip on Ragnar's arm, pulled him closer, and began dragging him deeper into the forest, into shadows where no one would think to look. The rejected Omega. The forest was quiet again by the time Liara finally stopped running. Her arms ached from dragging Ragnar's heavy body through the undergrowth. Twigs scratched her legs. Cold air burned in her lungs with every breath she took. The weight of the prince leaned against her shoulder as she struggled to keep him upright. Ragnar tried to walk, but his legs moved unevenly. The poison still held his muscles in a weak, trembling grip. Slow, Liara whispered under her breath. If you fall now, I won't be able to lift you again. Ragnar said nothing. His breathing was rough and shallow, but he forced his feet to move when she pulled him forward. They moved through narrow deer paths and across shallow streams where water erased footprints. Liara knew the forest better than anyone in the kingdom. She had spent 3 months surviving in it alone. Tonight, that knowledge was the only reason Ragnar was still alive. After what felt like an endless walk, the trees opened slightly and an old structure appeared ahead of them. The abandoned mill. Its wooden walls leaned crookedly against each other. Moss covered the stones of the foundation, and the broken wheel that once turned with the river had long ago stopped moving. Most people avoided the place. It looked unstable, half swallowed by the forest. To Liara it was shelter. She pushed the old door open with her shoulder and guided Ragnar inside. The interior smelled of damp wood and dust. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the boards, casting thin silver lines across the floor. Liara helped Ragnar sit against the wall. For a moment neither of them spoke. Ragnar's chest rose and fell heavily as he tried to regain his strength. Finally he lifted his head. My brother, he said hoarsely. Kaelrik. Liara looked at him. He ordered it. Ragnar let out a slow breath, like the truth itself weighed more than his wounds. He has wanted the throne since we were children, Ragnar continued quietly. But I never thought he would go this far. Liara crossed the room and grabbed a small clay jug from the corner. She returned and placed it in Ragnar's hands. Drink. Ragnar obeyed. The water ran down his throat greedily as though he had been dying of thirst. When he finished he leaned his head back against the wall. I can't return to the palace, he said after a moment. Liara's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Because Kaelrik will be waiting, Ragnar answered. If he buried me once, he will finish the job the moment I appear again. Liara studied him in silence. Ragnar continued, his voice steadier now. He controls the palace guard. Many of them are loyal to him, not to the crown. If I walk through those gates right now, I'll die before I reach the throne room. Liara folded her arms across her chest. So what do you plan to do? Ragnar looked at her. For now, survive. His steel-gray eyes examined her carefully in the dim light. You saved my life, he said. Liara shrugged slightly. You were buried alive. That doesn't answer my question. What question? Why you helped me. Liara turned away and walked toward the small window where broken boards allowed the night air inside. For a moment she didn't answer. Finally she spoke. I know what it feels like to be abandoned. Ragnar watched her. You're alone here, he said. Yes. Why? Liara hesitated. Then she said the word that still felt like a wound. I'm rejected. The room fell silent. Among wolves, rejection was worse than exile. It meant someone had been cast out not just from their home but from the entire structure of pack life. Rejected wolves had no protection, no status, no place in the hierarchy. They existed outside everything. Ragnar's brow furrowed slightly. Your pack cast you out? Liara nodded. 3 moons ago. Ragnar leaned forward slightly, studying her more closely. I smelled it earlier, he said quietly. Liara looked back at him. Smelled what? Something unusual about you. Liara's expression stiffened. Ragnar continued slowly. You smell like an Omega, but not entirely. Liara felt her chest tighten. Your senses must still be confused from the poison, she said flatly. Ragnar shook his head slightly. My senses are rarely wrong. Liara walked back toward him and crouched down. You're injured, she said. Focus on that instead. Ragnar gave a small, tired laugh. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. He shifted slightly and pain flashed across his face. Liara noticed immediately. What is it? My ribs, Ragnar muttered. When they buried me, something cracked. Liara studied him. Show me. Ragnar hesitated for only a moment before pulling open the torn fabric of his shirt. Dark bruises spread across his side. The skin was swollen and angry, evidence of broken bone beneath. Liara exhaled slowly. That will hurt for weeks. Ragnar looked at her. You're a healer? Liara shook her head slightly. Not exactly. She extended her hand toward his ribs. Ragnar's eyes followed the movement carefully. What are you doing? He asked. Liara met his gaze. You said something about my scent earlier. Yes. This is why. Before Ragnar could question her further, Liara placed her palm gently against his side. Her eyes closed. For a moment nothing happened. Then Ragnar gasped. Warmth spread through his ribs like liquid fire. The pain that had been sharp and heavy suddenly faded. Liara felt it too. But not as relief. The pain moved. It traveled from Ragnar's body into hers. Her own ribs suddenly throbbed as if they had been struck by a hammer. Liara sucked in a breath but forced herself not to pull away. The warmth faded. When she opened her eyes again, Ragnar was staring at her in disbelief. He looked down at his ribs. The bruising had faded significantly. The swelling was already shrinking. What did you do? Ragnar whispered. Liara slowly removed her hand. Exactly what I said. Ragnar's eyes lifted to her face again. You healed it. Yes. But how? Liara didn't answer immediately. Instead she shifted slightly. The movement caused pain to flare in her side. Ragnar noticed instantly. You're hurt. Liara shook her head. No. Ragnar leaned forward and grabbed her wrist gently. Liara. She stiffened slightly at the sound of her name. Show me. Liara sighed and slowly lifted the edge of her tunic. Dark bruises spread across her own ribs now, exactly where Ragnar's had been injured moments earlier. Ragnar stared at the marks. Understanding dawned slowly across his face. You transferred the injury. Liara lowered her shirt again. Yes. Ragnar released her wrist slowly. So you take the wounds yourself. Liara nodded. That is my gift. Ragnar leaned back against the wall again, stunned. That's why your pack rejected you. Liara's voice was calm. Yes. Ragnar shook his head slightly. They rejected someone who can save lives. Liara gave a faint, humorless smile. Some people think gifts like mine are unnatural. Ragnar watched her for a long moment. You saved me twice tonight, he said quietly. Liara shrugged. You would have suffocated in that grave. Ragnar's gaze softened slightly. And now you've healed my ribs. Liara stood and walked toward the door. I didn't heal them fully, she said. Why? Because if I took all your injuries at once, I might not survive it. Ragnar was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Fair. Liara turned back toward him. You should rest. Ragnar studied her again. You're hiding me? Yes. Why? Liara hesitated briefly. Then she said quietly, because if Kaelrik finds you again, he will finish what he started. Ragnar nodded slowly. And you? What about me? If you help me survive this, Ragnar said carefully, I can restore everything you lost. Liara raised an eyebrow. Everything? Status. Protection. A place in the kingdom again. Liara looked at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. I'm not doing this for a reward. Ragnar seemed surprised. Then why? Liara's answer was simple. Because you deserve a chance to live. The room fell quiet again. For the first time since waking from the grave, Ragnar felt something unfamiliar. Trust. Not the careful trust of politics or duty. Something simpler. Something real. Thank you, Ragnar said quietly. Liara didn't respond. She simply walked toward the broken doorway and looked out into the dark forest. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. Then a twig snapped. Liara's body stiffened instantly. Footsteps approached. Light ones. Not soldiers. Someone familiar. The door creaked open slowly. A tall young woman stepped inside, her dark eyes sharp as they scanned the room. Her gaze landed on Liara first, then moved past her. To Ragnar. Recognition flashed across her face. A slow smile spread across her lips. Well, she said softly. Isn't this interesting? Liara's stomach dropped. Selka. Her sister stepped further into the room, her eyes glittering with cruel amusement as she looked at the wounded prince. The missing crown prince, Selka said quietly. Alive. Liara realized at that moment that everything had just become far more dangerous. The sister's secret. The old mill fell silent after Selka stepped inside. Cold air slipped through the broken wooden boards, carrying the smell of damp leaves and river water. The room seemed smaller suddenly, as if the walls themselves had leaned closer to listen. Selka stood near the doorway, her dark cloak brushing the dusty floor. Her sharp eyes moved slowly from Liara to the man sitting against the wall. Prince Ragnar. Even weakened and pale, there was no mistaking him. Selka's lips curved slightly. Well, she said softly, this is a surprise. Liara stepped forward quickly, placing herself between Selka and Ragnar. You shouldn't be here, Liara said quietly. Selka folded her arms. And yet here I am. Her gaze slid past Liara again, studying Ragnar carefully. The crown prince, she murmured. Alive. Ragnar remained silent, watching Selka with steady eyes. Selka tilted her head slightly. The entire kingdom believes you died in a hunting accident 3 days ago, she continued. They're mourning you in the capital. Ragnar's voice came low and controlled. And yet here I am. Selka smiled faintly. Yes. The smile faded quickly as something colder replaced it. Do you know how valuable that information is? Liara's stomach tightened. Selka. Her sister raised a hand, silencing her. Prince Kaelrik is offering rewards, Selka said calmly. He wants to hear any rumors about unusual activity in the forest. Liara's voice sharpened. You wouldn't. Selka's expression remained unreadable. Wouldn't I? Liara stared at her. You're talking about betraying the future king. Selka shrugged. The future king might be someone else now. The words hung heavily in the air. Ragnar's steel-gray eyes hardened. So Kaelrik has already moved. Selka glanced at him again. Of course he has. The court believes you're dead. The throne cannot stay empty forever. Liara clenched her fists. Selka, listen to me. I am listening. You know Kaelrik. You know what he's capable of. Selka's gaze flickered briefly. But it didn't soften. What I know, she said slowly, is that our family survives by making smart choices. Liara took a step closer. Selling Ragnar to Kaelrik isn't smart. It might keep us alive. Ragnar suddenly pushed himself up slightly from the wall. The movement was slow, but the authority behind it was unmistakable. Enough. The word carried weight. Alpha command. Even weak, even poisoned, the power of an alpha prince filled the room like a storm. Selka's body stiffened instantly. Her wolf reacted before her mind could. Every instinct in her screamed to obey. Ragnar's gaze locked onto hers. Leave, he said. Selka's lips parted, but no sound came out. The command pressed down on her like invisible hands. For a moment she resisted. Then her shoulders lowered slightly. She took a step back toward the door. But before leaving, she turned her eyes toward Liara. Something dark flickered there. You should be careful, sister. Liara frowned. What do you mean? Selka's voice dropped to a quiet whisper. You think he'll protect you? Liara didn't answer. Selka's eyes shifted briefly toward Ragnar. But when he learns the truth about you, he'll kill you himself. Liara felt her chest tighten. Leave, Ragnar repeated. The command was sharper now. Selka finally stepped outside. The door creaked shut behind her. Silence returned to the mill. For several seconds neither Liara nor Ragnar spoke. Then Ragnar's body suddenly swayed. Liara rushed forward just in time to catch him as his knees buckled. Ragnar. His skin burned beneath her hands. Your fever, she whispered. Ragnar's breathing had become uneven again. She helped him sit down slowly against the wall. His face had gone pale and sweat glistened along his temples. Liara frowned. This wasn't normal. The poison should have weakened him, but the fever felt different. Stronger. Worse. Hold still, she said. Ragnar nodded weakly. Liara pulled open the torn edge of his shirt. The sight beneath made her breath catch. Black veins. Thin dark lines spread across his chest like cracks in ice. They stretched outward from a point just below his collarbone. Liara touched one gently. The skin there felt hot and strange. What is this? She asked quietly. Ragnar looked down. His expression darkened. So it's begun. Liara looked up at him. Begun. Ragnar leaned back against the wall. Nightshade blood magic. Liara's brow furrowed. Poison? Yes. His voice sounded tired now. Before they buried me, Kael'ric showed me the vial. Liara felt anger rise in her chest. He wanted you to know. Ragnar nodded slowly. He wanted me to understand exactly how I was going to die. Liara stared again at the black lines spreading across his chest. They're moving. Yes. How long do you have? Ragnar hesitated. Days maybe. Liara's hands tightened. No. Ragnar's voice remained calm. The poison is designed to be slow. Liara looked back at the dark veins. There has to be a cure. Ragnar shook his head slightly. Kael'ric wouldn't use a poison that could be easily undone. Liara didn't answer. Instead she leaned closer, studying the marks. Something about them bothered her. They weren't spreading randomly. They seemed to move in pulses, as if responding to something. Liara frowned. When did it get worse? She asked. Ragnar thought for a moment. At the mill earlier. When my sister arrived? Yes. Liara considered that. What were you feeling at the time? Ragnar blinked slowly. Anger. Liara nodded. And before that? Ragnar frowned slightly, thinking. When I told you I trusted you. Liara froze. The words echoed in her mind. Trust. Emotion. Connection. Her heart sank as realization slowly formed. This isn't normal poison, she whispered. Ragnar gave a faint smile. I told you. Blood magic. Liara shook her head. No, it's more than that. She looked at him again. The curse feeds on something. Ragnar's brow furrowed. On what? Liara swallowed. Connection. Ragnar stared at her. The stronger your emotional bond with someone, the stronger the poison becomes. The room fell silent. Ragnar looked down at the dark veins again. So every time I care about someone? Liara finished the sentence quietly. It spreads faster. Ragnar leaned his head back against the wall. For a moment his eyes closed. When he opened them again, something inside them had changed. Acceptance. So that's Kael'ric's plan. Liara felt anger flare. What do you mean? Ragnar's voice was calm but bitter. He knows me. Liara waited. He knows I can't live without caring about people. Liara's throat tightened. So the poison kills you for being human? Ragnar gave a small laugh. Exactly. Liara clenched her hands. Then we fight it. Ragnar looked at her. You heard me. Liara's voice was firm now. We fight it. Ragnar shook his head slowly. You should leave. Liara frowned. No. If you stay near me, the poison will only grow stronger. Liara's eyes hardened. I'm not leaving. Ragnar studied her face. You barely know me. That doesn't matter. Ragnar was silent. Liara knelt beside him again. I've survived alone for 3 months, she said quietly. I know what it feels like to be abandoned. Ragnar looked at her. I won't abandon you. Liara held his gaze steadily. We'll figure this out. Ragnar watched her for a long moment. Then he sighed quietly. You're stubborn. Liara gave a small smile. Yes. Ragnar leaned his head back again. His breathing had slowed slightly, though the fever still burned. Liara carefully pulled his shirt closed. Her mind was already racing. Poison. Blood magic. A curse that fed on emotional connection. There had to be something in the old stories. Something about nightshade curses. Something about breaking them. Liara stood slowly. I'll find a way, she said. Ragnar looked up at her. How? Liara met his gaze. I don't know yet. Her voice remained steady. But I will. Outside the broken mill, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, Liara stared at the dark veins spreading across Ragnar's chest. And for the first time since pulling him from the grave, She made a silent promise. She would not let him die, no matter what it took. The poison that feeds on love. The abandoned watchtower stood on a rocky hill deep in the forest. Long ago it had been built to guard the northern road to Skeldrame, but time and weather had slowly broken it down. Its stones were cracked and vines crawled across the walls like green fingers reclaiming the building. Few people came here anymore. That was exactly why Liara chose it. The entrance to the cellar was hidden behind thick brush and fallen branches. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a patch of wild growth. Inside, the cellar was small but dry. Old shelves leaned against the walls and dusty crates sat in the corners. A narrow stone window near the ceiling allowed a thin line of daylight to enter. It was not comfortable, but it was safe, for now. Ragnar sat on a rough blanket against the wall while Liara carefully pushed the wooden door closed above them. "Did you see anyone?" Ragnar asked quietly. Liara shook her head. "Not yet." She moved toward the narrow window and looked outside again. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, tall trees standing like silent guards. But somewhere out there, soldiers were searching. They had been searching for 2 days. Every now and then Liara could hear distant voices or the faint sound of horses moving through the woods. Kaelrik's men were sweeping the forest carefully, determined to find the missing prince. Liara stepped away from the window and turned toward Ragnar. "How are you feeling?" Ragnar gave a faint smile. "Like someone buried me alive." Liara frowned slightly. "That wasn't meant to be funny." "I know." But the humor faded quickly. Ragnar's breathing had become heavier again. The fever had not left him since the night at the mill. His strength returned slowly in small moments, but it never lasted long. Liara knelt beside him. "Show me." Ragnar didn't argue. He opened the front of his shirt. Liara's heart sank immediately. The black veins had spread further. They stretched across his chest now, dark and thin like cracks in frozen ice. Some had begun creeping upward toward his shoulder. Liara reached out and gently touched one of the lines. The skin was hot. Too hot. "It's worse," she whispered. Ragnar nodded slowly. "Yes." Liara pulled her hand away and sat back on her heels. The silence between them felt heavy. Finally Ragnar spoke again. "You should leave." Liara looked up sharply. "No. You know what this poison does." Liara's eyes hardened. "I also know what happens if I leave." Ragnar studied her face. "You barely survived 3 months alone in the forest. If Kaelrik soldiers catch you helping me, they will kill you." Liara shrugged slightly. "They might kill me anyway." Ragnar didn't smile this time. He simply looked tired. Liara stood and walked toward one of the old shelves. Several dusty books lay stacked there, their leather covers cracked with age. She had discovered them the day before while searching the cellar. They were old records left by the watchtower's previous guards. Some of them contained stories about magic. Liara picked one up and opened it carefully. "I've been reading," she said. Ragnar watched her quietly. "What did you find?" Liara turned a few pages before answering. "This poison isn't normal." "I know. It was created by a blood witch." Ragnar's eyes narrowed slightly. "That makes sense." Liara looked back at him. "You knew?" Ragnar nodded slowly. "When Kaelrik showed me the vial before they buried me, he said the poison was special." Liara closed the book slowly. "He wanted you to understand what was happening." "Yes." Liara sat down across from him again. "There's more." Ragnar waited. "The poison doesn't just weaken your body." He raised an eyebrow. "I noticed." Liara met his gaze. "It feeds on something." Ragnar frowned. "On what?" Liara took a slow breath. "Emotion." The word hung in the air between them. Ragnar's eyes shifted downward toward the black veins on his chest. "So every time I feel something." Liara nodded. "It grows stronger." Ragnar leaned back against the wall again. For a moment he said nothing. Then he gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "Kaelrik always said I cared too much about people." Liara frowned. "That's not a weakness." In his eyes it was. Ragnar stared at the stone ceiling. He believed emotions made leaders weak. Liara shook her head. "They make leaders human." Ragnar turned his head slightly, studying her face. "You're strange." Liara raised an eyebrow. "I've been called worse." Ragnar's expression softened slightly. "You saved my life." Liara looked away. "You were buried alive. And you dug me out with your bare hands." Liara shrugged again. "I couldn't leave you there." Ragnar watched her carefully. "Why?" Liara hesitated. Then she spoke quietly. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind." Ragnar waited. Liara stared at the floor. My pack rejected me. You told me. But not why. Ragnar didn't interrupt. Liara continued slowly. My gift frightened them. The healing? Yes. Liara's voice remained calm, but her hands had tightened slightly in her lap. They believed my power was unnatural. Ragnar frowned. So they cast you out? Yes. Liara lifted her eyes. No trial. No explanation. Just exile. Ragnar studied her face carefully. That must have been hard. Liara gave a small, humorless smile. It was quiet. Ragnar didn't understand at first. Then she explained. No one defended me. The words were simple. But the weight behind them filled the cellar. Ragnar's expression changed slightly. For the first time since Liara had met him, his eyes held something deeper than anger or pain. Understanding. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Liara shrugged again. I survived. Ragnar nodded slowly. Yes, you did. The silence between them returned. But it felt different now. Closer. Warmer. Liara realized suddenly that Ragnar was still looking at her. What? She asked. You're stronger than most wolves I know. Liara blinked. That's not saying much. It is. Liara looked away quickly. But Ragnar had already noticed the faint color rising in her cheeks. And that was the moment the poison reacted. Ragnar suddenly inhaled sharply. Liara looked up immediately. What happened? Ragnar's hand moved instinctively to his chest. The black veins had spread again. Another thin line crept toward his shoulder. Liara's heart sank. The connection, she whispered. Ragnar nodded slowly. Yes. Liara clenched her fists. This is wrong. Ragnar watched her quietly. What do you mean? You're being punished for caring. Ragnar looked at the dark veins again. Maybe Kaelrik is right. Liara frowned. About what? That emotions are dangerous. Liara shook her head firmly. No. Ragnar looked back at her. Then why is this happening? Liara didn't hesitate. Because your brother is cruel. Ragnar stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. You're stubborn. Yes. Ragnar sighed. You should still leave. Liara stood up immediately. No. Ragnar opened his mouth to argue again. But Liara stepped closer. You're not dying alone. Ragnar looked up at her. His voice softened. You barely know me. Liara met his gaze steadily. That doesn't matter. Ragnar stared at her for a long moment. Something inside him shifted. Slowly. Quietly. Inevitably. Liara, he said softly. Yes. Ragnar's voice dropped to a whisper. I love you. For one brief second everything felt still. Then Ragnar gasped. The black veins exploded outward across his chest. Pain shot through his body like lightning. His back arched as the poison surged violently through his veins. Liara rushed forward. Ragnar. The healer's secret. Ragnar's body jerked violently as the poison surged. The black veins spread like lightning beneath his skin, crawling over his chest, up his neck and toward his jaw. His eyes widened for a second, filled with pain and shock, and then his breath snapped off as if something inside him had been cut. Liara caught him before he hit the stone floor. Ragnar, she cried, lowering him onto the blankets with shaking hands. His skin burned like fire beneath her palms. His lips were turning pale. His chest was not rising. Liara pressed her ear to his mouth. No breath. She pushed her fingers against his neck, searching desperately for a pulse. Nothing. Her stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling. No, she whispered. No, 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 not like this. The cellar felt smaller, darker, colder, even though Ragnar's body was still hot with fever. Liara's hands trembled as she grabbed his shoulders and shook him lightly. Ragnar, wake up. His head rolled to the side. So. Liara stared at his face, the face of a man who had been buried alive and pulled from the earth only to die again in her arms. Her chest tightened until breathing hurt. Then something inside her snapped. She had been careful her whole life. Measured. Controlled. She had always used her gift in small pieces, like holding back a storm behind a thin door. Now she didn't care about doors. She didn't care about rules. She didn't care about the warnings her father had shouted at her when she was younger. She only cared about one thing. Ragnar could not die. Liara placed both hands over Ragnar's chest. Her fingers spread across the black veins. She closed her eyes. And she reached inward, past fear, past pain, past everything. She called her power the way she had always called it when someone was injured. Warmth rose from deep inside her like fire waking up. It poured down her arms, flooded into her palms, and slammed into the poison in Ragnar's body. Instantly she felt it. Not like a wound. Not like broken bone or torn flesh. This was different. The poison was alive. Not in a normal way but in a cruel, hungry way, as if it had a mind made of darkness. It recognized her touch. Fought back. Pain exploded through Liara's arms. A cold, twisting burn pushed into her veins as the first thread of poison transferred into her body. Liara's eyes flew open. She gasped sharply, feeling her chest tighten as if ice had been shoved into her lungs. Still she didn't stop. She pulled harder. She dragged more of the poison out of Ragnar, forcing it into herself like ripping thorns from flesh. The black veins on Ragnar's chest began to fade, slowly turning from deep black to dark gray. But Liara's body began to shake. The poison spread through her instead, crawling under her skin like cold fire. Her hands became numb. Her vision blurred. Her throat burned as if she had swallowed smoke. She tasted metal. She could barely breathe. But she kept pulling. Because Ragnar was still lifeless beneath her hands. And Liara refused to accept that. "Come back," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Please, come back." She pressed down harder, trying to force her warmth into his heart. Then the poison inside her surged. It rose like a wave. Liara cried out as her body arched, pain tearing through her ribs, her spine, her shoulders. For a brief, terrifying moment she thought she had made a mistake. She thought she had killed herself for nothing. Then something shifted. The darkness inside her met something else. Something she had never touched before. Something buried under her gift like a second heartbeat. A shadow beneath the warmth. Liara froze, trembling. Her eyes widened as sudden understanding hit her like lightning. All her life, she believed her gift had one direction. Absorb. Carry. She could pull wounds out of others and hold them in her own body. That was the part her pack feared. That was the part her father called cursed. But the truth was bigger. Her gift was not only to absorb. It was also to release. To push the damage outward. To move it. To transfer it somewhere else. Liara stared down at her hands, shaking. "No," she whispered. The memory came so fast it made her dizzy. A room lit by firelight. Her mother coughing, weak and pale. Liara at 14 crying, trying to save her. Pulling sickness into her own body until her stomach burned, until her lungs felt full of mud. And then, her father stumbling back, suddenly sick, suddenly choking. Liara remembered the fear in his eyes. He had felt it. He had realized what she could do. She could take pain. And she could give it back. That was why he had truly cast her out. Not because she healed, but because she could become a weapon. Liara swallowed hard. Her father had feared her power more than he ever loved her. That fear had shaped her whole life. And now, in this cellar, with poison inside her veins and Ragnar's body still cold beneath her hands, the bindings broke. The limits shattered. Liara breathed through the pain and leaned down again. She pressed her forehead gently to Ragnar's. "I'm not losing you," she whispered. She reached again, this time not only pulling poison out but pushing life into him. Her warmth surged, stronger than before. The poison in her body screamed silently, twisting, clawing, trying to destroy her from inside. Liara fought back. She forced the poison into one corner of her being, trapping it there with sheer will. Then she poured everything else into Ragnar. For a second nothing happened. Then Ragnar's chest rose sharply. He sucked in a breath like a drowning man breaking the surface. Liara jerked back, stunned. Ragnar coughed, weak and rough but alive. Alive. Tears blurred Liara's vision. "Ragnar," she breathed. His eyes fluttered open slowly. They were glassy with pain and exhaustion, but they focused on her face. "Liara?" he rasped, voice thin. Liara let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You're alive?" she whispered. Ragnar tried to speak again, but his body trembled violently. He looked down at his chest. The black veins were still there but they had faded. They were gray now, like old bruises instead of living poison. Liara knew what that meant. She had pulled most of it into herself. And she was still holding it. Before she could speak, a sound came from above. Boots. Heavy boots. Many. Liara stiffened instantly. Ragnar's eyes sharpened despite his weakness. He heard it too. Then the cellar door slammed open. Torchlight flooded the space. Figures in dark armor poured down the steps, swords drawn. And behind them walked a man who looked like Ragnar. Same sharp jaw. Same dark hair. Same blood. But where Ragnar's eyes held warmth beneath pain, this man's eyes held nothing. Empty. Cold. Prince Kaelrik. He stepped down slowly, smiling like he had all the time in the world. "Well," Kael'ric said softly, his voice smooth with cruel amusement, "isn't this a beautiful scene?" Liara rose slowly to her feet, placing herself in front of Ragnar without thinking. Kael'ric's gaze swept over Ragnar's form. Surprise flickered briefly across his face. "You're still breathing," he said. Ragnar's voice came out low and rough. "You tried to bury me alive." Kael'ric shrugged. "I succeeded," he said. "At least in the way that mattered. The kingdom believes you're dead." Liara's hands clenched. "You poisoned him," she said. Kael'ric's smile widened. "Of course." His eyes moved to Liara now, studying her properly. "And you must be the rejected Omega." Liara didn't respond. Kael'ric's voice turned almost conversational, as if discussing weather. "The poison was nightshade blood magic," he said. "Not something anyone can cure." Liara's eyes narrowed. "Someone made it?" Kael'ric's smile sharpened. "Yes." He leaned forward slightly, pleased with himself. "A blood witch named Yold." Liara's breath caught. "My grandmother," she whispered, the words leaving her before she could stop them. Kael'ric's eyes glinted. "So you know?" "Yes," he said calmly. "I used her." Liara's stomach turned. "She wouldn't." "She did," Kael'ric replied, voice cold. "Not willingly at first. But everyone has something they care about. Everyone can be pushed." Liara's hands trembled. Kael'ric continued, enjoying every word. "She made the poison. She bound it perfectly to emotion so it would grow stronger with love. And once she served her purpose, I had your father remove her." Liara's eyes widened. "You made my father kill her." Kael'ric shrugged. He didn't need much convincing. He was terrified of what her bloodline carried. Liara's chest tightened as rage rose like fire. Kael'ric lifted his hand slightly. "Kill them," he said casually to his soldiers. The guards moved forward. Liara felt the poison inside her twist, hungry. And now she understood it fully. She didn't have to carry it. She could release it. Liara lifted her hands. Her palms faced the soldiers. The darkness inside her surged outward like a wave. It slammed into the first guard. He dropped instantly, stiff and shaking, eyes wide with terror. The second fell. Then the third. One by one, Kael'ric's soldiers collapsed, paralyzed, their bodies locked in place as if buried alive in invisible soil. Kael'ric stumbled back, shock flashing across his empty face. "What are you?" he breathed. Liara's eyes burned with fierce calm. "I'm the healer you rejected," she said quietly. "And I'm the poison you created." Behind her, Ragnar drew another shaky breath. And for the first time since the grave, Kael'ric looked afraid. The fall of the false prince. The cellar was filled with torchlight and heavy breathing. Kael'ric stood frozen on the lowest step, his confident mask cracked. Around him, his soldiers lay on the ground like statues, eyes wide, bodies locked in cruel stillness. They could not scream. They could not move. They could only feel the terror of helplessness. Liara remained in front of Ragnar, her hands still raised, fingers slightly spread. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but her eyes were steady. The poison she had released was still inside her too, still coiled in her veins like a living storm. Kael'ric swallowed, his voice rough now. "What are you?" Liara took a slow step forward. "I'm the one you thought was nothing," she said, calm and dangerous. Kael'ric forced a small laugh, but it sounded weak. "A rejected Omega," he said, trying to regain control. "A stray." Liara's eyes sharpened. "You buried a prince alive," she replied. "You used blood magic to poison him. You murdered my grandmother through my father. And you thought you could walk away with a crown." Kael'ric's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the throne," he hissed. "You don't understand what it costs." Liara moved another step closer. "I understand exactly what it costs," she said quietly. "It costs people their lives when monsters want power." Kael'ric's eyes flickered toward Ragnar behind her. Ragnar was sitting up now, still pale, still shaking but awake and watching. His gaze was sharp, full of pain and fury and something colder than both. Kael'ric's lip curled. "You're alive," he muttered. "You shouldn't be." Ragnar's voice came out low and steady. "I shouldn't have trusted you." Kael'ric's face twisted. "You were always the favorite," he spat. "Always the perfect prince. Always the one father looked at with pride." Ragnar didn't flinch. "I never asked for that." Kael'ric's hands clenched into fists. "You didn't have to ask. You were born and the world handed you everything." Liara felt the poison inside her stir in response to her anger. It reacted to emotion the same way it had reacted inside Ragnar. It fed on darkness too, On rage, on pain, on the need to strike back. And Liara had rage. So much rage. Kael'ric took a step backward, but his confidence tried to return. You can't kill me, he said, voice hard. Even if you can paralyze my guards, even if you can throw poison like a weapon, you won't be able to take the throne from me. Liara's mouth tightened. You don't deserve to breathe. Kael'ric's eyes widened slightly. Then he lifted his chin and sneered, forcing bravado. Do it then. Kill me. Prove you're not just a frightened little exile with a trick. Liara's hands trembled. Not from fear. From the weight of what she could do. She could end him right here. She could push every drop of poison into Kael'ric's veins, make him feel everything Ragnar had felt beneath the dirt, make him suffer until he begged for mercy he would never receive. The poison inside her surged like it wanted permission. Liara stepped forward, her gaze locked on Kael'ric. Kael'ric's smile faltered. For the first time, real fear entered his eyes. Liara, Ragnar's voice cut through the cellar. Liara froze mid-step. Ragnar pushed himself to his feet, swaying. His legs looked unsteady, but he forced them to hold him up. He moved beside her, not behind her, standing like a prince even in weakness. Liara didn't turn her head. He deserves it, she whispered. Ragnar's voice was low but firm. Yes. Liara's breath caught slightly. Ragnar continued. But you don't. Liara finally turned to look at him. His eyes held hers. Not pleading. Not ordering. Just truth. If you kill him, Ragnar said quietly, you become the kind of wolf who solves everything with death. Liara's jaw tightened. He tried to kill you. I know. He killed my grandmother. I know. He used my father like a tool. I know. Liara's eyes burned with emotion. Then why are you stopping me? Ragnar swallowed, his throat working as if every word cost him something. Because he already took enough from us, he said. Don't give him the last piece of you too. Liara's hands lowered slowly. The poison inside her stirred, restless, angry. Kael'ric exhaled sharply, relief flashing across his face before he hit it again. He straightened, smugness trying to return. How touching, he said, voice sharp with mockery. The noble prince and the rejected Omega. A romance in the dirt. Liara's eyes snapped back to him. Ragnar stepped forward. Kael'ric's smile widened. You can't hurt me, Kael'ric said. Even if you live, even if you drag yourself back to the palace, no one will believe you. The kingdom mourned you. The court accepted your death. Ragnar's gaze stayed cold. Kael'ric kept talking, faster now, trying to find power in words. I'll return and tell father you attacked me, he hissed. I'll say you've gone mad. I'll say you're dangerous. He'll lock you away and I'll be crowned anyway. The guard already listens to me. Enough. A new voice filled the cellar like thunder. Everyone froze. Kael'ric's words died instantly. Liara's head turned toward the stairs. At the top of the cellar steps stood a man tall and broad, his presence forcing the air to change. His dark hair was threaded with gray, and his face carried the weight of sleepless nights and grief. But his eyes were clear and furious. King Alaric. Behind him stood guards in royal armor, swords drawn. And beside the king stood Selka. Liara's sister looked smaller now, her posture tense, her face tight with fear and guilt. Kael'ric's expression shifted sharply. Father, he said quickly, forcing a shocked tone. You shouldn't be here. This is dangerous. The king descended slowly, each step deliberate. It is dangerous, King Alaric said, voice cold. Because my son's murderer is here. Kael'ric stiffened. Murderer? He scoffed weakly. Father, you're still grieving. You're hearing lies. No, the king said flatly. I'm hearing truth. Liara's heart pounded. Selka stepped forward slightly, voice shaking. I saw them, she said. I saw Kael'ric give the order. I saw the men drag Ragnar into the forest. I followed the trail and I found Liara hiding him. Kael'ric's head snapped toward Selka. You traitorous little? The king's voice cut him off like a blade. Silence. Kael'ric swallowed, his throat working. The king gestured with one hand. Guards moved into the cellar carrying a chained prisoner. Liara's stomach tightened as she recognized the man. Eldric. Her father. His hands were bound behind his back. His face was pale. His eyes refused to meet Liara's. Liara's breath caught. The king looked at Eldric without pity. This man confessed, King Alaric said. He confessed to helping Kael'ric. He confessed to murdering Yold. Liara's chest felt hollow. Eldric's voice came thin and desperate. I had no choice. Liara stared at him. You always had a choice, she said quietly. Eldrick flinched but still would not meet her gaze. The king turned his eyes back to Kael'ric. And you, King Alaric said, will answer for what you did to your brother. Kael'ric's jaw tightened, panic and fury mixing. You can't prove. Ragnar moved. Faster than Kael'ric expected. Even weak, even recovering, Ragnar's body still held the instincts of a warrior prince. He crossed the distance and grabbed Kael'ric by the front of his shirt, yanking him forward. Kael'ric swung first. Ragnar dodged and slammed his fist into Kael'ric's jaw. Kael'ric staggered. Ragnar hit him again. Kael'ric grabbed Ragnar's shoulder and tried to throw him off, but Ragnar drove his knee into Kael'ric's stomach, forcing air from him. Liara's heart jumped. Ragnar. But Ragnar didn't stop. He shoved Kael'ric back against the wall, forearm pressing into Kael'ric's throat. Kael'ric struggled, choking, eyes wild. Ragnar leaned close, voice low enough that only Kael'ric could truly hear. You buried me alive, Ragnar said. You watched me die. Kael'ric's face twisted. You were always. Ragnar shoved harder, cutting the words off. For a second Liara thought Ragnar might kill him. Then Ragnar's arm loosened. He stepped back. And the guards rushed forward, grabbing Kael'ric and chaining him. Kael'ric fought but it was useless. His mouth opened, screaming threats but no one listened. King Alaric's voice came sharp. Take him to the dungeons. He will stand trial for treason and attempted murder of the crown prince. Kael'ric was dragged up the stairs, still shouting, still twisting, still trying to claw his way back into power. The cellar grew quiet again. Ragnar swayed slightly. Liara stepped forward instinctively, steadying him with her hand. He didn't pull away. He stood tall for a moment, then looked at the king. Father, Ragnar said, voice rough. King Alaric stared at him as if afraid he might vanish again. Then he stepped closer and placed a firm hand on Ragnar's shoulder. My son, he said quietly. You're alive. Ragnar nodded once. I am. The king's gaze shifted to Liara. His eyes softened slightly, though exhaustion still weighed on his face. And you, King Alaric said, you saved him. Liara swallowed. I only. The king raised a hand gently. No, he said. You did what my own blood failed to do. You protected him when the palace could not. Liara felt her throat tighten. King Alaric's voice lowered, sincere and heavy with meaning. Thank you, he said, for saving my son. The queen who was rejected. 6 months passed slowly in the kingdom of Skeldrame. Winter came and went across the mountains. The thick snow that once covered the forests slowly melted beneath the return of spring sunlight. Rivers that had been frozen began to flow again, and life slowly returned to the land. During those months many things changed. Inside the royal palace, Prince Ragnar recovered. At first his body remained weak. The poison had damaged him deeply, and the healing process was slow. Some days he could barely walk across the room without exhaustion. Other days he trained carefully with the palace warriors to rebuild his strength. But Ragnar was stubborn. Every morning he rose before sunrise. Every morning he trained harder than the day before. Liara watched the progress quietly. She had remained in the palace since the night Kael'ric was captured. At first she felt uncomfortable inside the massive stone halls of Skeldrame. The palace felt too large, too formal, too filled with people watching her every movement. But Ragnar refused to let her disappear into the shadows. Whenever the court gathered, he stood beside her openly. He never hid her. He never acted ashamed of her. Slowly the whispers of the court began to change. At first many nobles feared Liara's power. They had heard the story of the poison spreading through Kael'ric's soldiers like invisible chains. Some believed she was dangerous. Others believed she was cursed. But the truth revealed itself little by little. Liara continued to heal. When soldiers returned injured from patrols along the border, she helped them. When servants fell ill, she treated them. When a stable boy was crushed beneath a frightened horse, she saved his life. Each time she used her power, the same miracle appeared. She pulled pain from others. And she carried it herself. Many people saw the wounds appear on her own skin before slowly fading away. They began to understand something important. Liara did not harm people. She carried their suffering instead. Word spread across Skeldrame. Soon people spoke of her power differently. Not as something frightening, but as something sacred. Even the royal scholars began studying the old books about bloodline magic. They discovered records about Liara's grandmother, Yold. Long before Kael'ric had forced her into darkness, Yold had been known as one of the greatest healers of the northern kingdoms. Her bloodline had always carried powerful magic. But fear had hidden the truth for generations. Now the truth returned. And Liara's name slowly became respected. Meanwhile, Ragnar continued healing. The last traces of the poison faded from his body. The gray marks that once stained his chest disappeared completely. The Blood Witch's curse no longer existed. It had been broken forever. When Ragnar finally returned to full strength, the entire kingdom celebrated. A great ceremony was held in the central courtyard of the palace. Thousands of people gathered beneath bright banners as Ragnar stood before them wearing the armor of the crown prince. King Alaric himself placed the silver wolf crest across Ragnar's chest. The crowd roared with approval. The prince they believed dead had returned. The traitor who tried to steal the throne had been imprisoned. Justice had been restored. But Ragnar's eyes searched the crowd for only one person. Liara stood quietly at the edge of the courtyard. She wore a simple dress of deep blue cloth, nothing like the rich gowns of the noble women around her. Her dark hair rested across her shoulders, and her calm expression remained unchanged even as thousands of voices shouted Ragnar's name. When the ceremony ended, Ragnar walked directly toward her. The crowd slowly grew silent. Ragnar stopped in front of Liara. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Ragnar lowered himself onto one knee. A ripple of shock spread through the nobles watching. Crown princes did not kneel. But Ragnar didn't care about their traditions. He looked up at Liara with steady eyes. "You saved my life," he said. Liara shook her head gently. "You saved yourself." Ragnar smiled faintly. "You saved my soul." The courtyard was silent now. Every noble, soldier, servant, and citizen was watching. Ragnar continued speaking. "When I was buried in the forest, I believed my life was finished." Liara listened quietly. "But you pulled me back into the light." Ragnar's voice remained calm, but the emotion inside it was clear. "You stayed when it was dangerous. You fought when it seemed impossible. And you carried pain that was never meant to be yours." Liara's eyes softened slightly. Ragnar reached forward and gently took her hand. "I love you," he said simply. The words were not dramatic, but they were honest. "And I will love you for the rest of my life." Liara felt the warmth of his hand and the steady strength in his voice. For a moment she remembered the forest. The loneliness. The cold nights when she believed she would always live alone. That life felt far away now. Ragnar's voice continued. "Liara of the healer's bloodline," he said. "Will you become my mate?" The courtyard remained silent, waiting for her answer. Liara looked at Ragnar for a long moment. Then she smiled gently. "Yes." The crowd erupted. Cheers echoed across the courtyard as Ragnar stood and pulled Liara into a warm embrace. The court musicians began playing, and banners were lifted high above the crowd. Preparations for the bonding ceremony began immediately. 3 days later, the ceremony took place beneath the great stone arch at the center of Skeldrime. Torches lined the courtyard walls as hundreds of citizens gathered to witness the union. King Alaric stood beside Ragnar. When Liara arrived, the king stepped forward to meet her. For a moment they simply looked at one another. Then King Alaric bowed his head slightly. "You saved my son," he said quietly. Liara nodded. "I only did what anyone would do." The king shook his head. "No," he said. "Not anyone." His voice softened. "You will always have a place in this family." Liara felt emotion rise in her chest. The ceremony continued as Ragnar and Liara stood together beneath the arch. Before the bonding began, another figure stepped forward slowly. Selka. Liara's sister looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly. She stopped a few steps away. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Selka said quietly. Liara listened. "I almost betrayed you," Selka continued. "But when I saw what Kaelrik had done, I couldn't stay silent." Liara studied her sister's face. Fear and regret filled Selka's eyes. After a long moment, Liara stepped forward and hugged her. Selka froze in surprise. "You told the truth," Liara said gently. "That matters." Selka's shoulders shook as relief washed over her. When the moment ended, Selka stepped aside. The ceremony finally began. Ragnar and Liara stood before the kingdom as the ancient ritual words were spoken. Their hands were bound together with a silver ribbon, symbolizing the bond between wolf and healer. The crowd cheered as the final vow was spoken. From that day forward, the rejected Omega was no longer alone. Her bloodline was restored. Her power was honored. And her place beside Ragnar was unquestioned. As the sun set behind the mountains, Ragnar and Liara stepped onto the high balcony overlooking the kingdom. Thousands of people filled the streets below. Torches lit the city in golden light. Ragnar took Liara's hand and raised it high. The crowd roared with celebration. In that moment the entire kingdom saw them together. Not as prince and exile. Not as Alpha and Omega. But as the leaders who had survived betrayal, darkness, and death. And who had chosen love instead. From that day forward, Skeldraim would remember their names. Ragnar the Wolf King. And Liara the Healer Queen. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.